My husband told me to step out of his birthday photo loud enough for everyone to hear. And in that moment, I understood something simple and brutal. I was standing inside my own marriage, but I wasn't considered family. I remember the exact sound his voice made. Not angry, not embarrassed, casual, like he was asking someone to move their car. Hey, can you step out for a second? Just family. For half a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard him. I was smiling already, angled toward the camera, my hand still resting on his arm. The room smelled like garlic and baked bread, and someone behind us was laughing too loudly. The phone was raised. Everyone was waiting. I looked at Mark, my husband of 7 years, and waited for him to look back at me and realize what he'd just said. He didn't. He was already looking past me, lining up the shot. His ex-wife, Denise, was standing on his other side, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. His daughter, Kayla, was there, too, 16 and awkward, staring down at her shoes like she wished the floor would open up. Mark's sister, Laura, waved from the edge of the group, trying to squeeze everyone in. I felt the heat rise up my neck and settle in my face. My wedding ring suddenly felt tight, like it didn't belong on my finger anymore. Oh, I said, I don't remember, meaning to say anything at all. Okay. I stepped back, then another step. Someone shifted to fill the space where I'd been standing, like water closing over a stone. The camera clicked. I turned and walked out of the banquet room before anyone could say my name. That was the climax, whether Mark knew it or not. Everything else came after. The restaurant was Majano's in Neepville, Illinois. A place we'd been to a dozen times over the years, always for birthdays or anniversaries. Safe, familiar, middle-of-the-road Italian, food that everyone could agree on. The kind of place where the servers wore black vests and called you folks. It was Mark's 52nd birthday, Wednesday night, 7:18 p.m. According to the clock above, the hostess stand that I stared at while I waited for my eyes to stop burning. I could still hear the party behind me, forks scraping plates, a burst of laughter, the low hum of conversations, layered on top of each other, life going on uninterrupted. I walked past an older couple waiting to be seated. The woman glanced at me, then away the way people do when they sense something is wrong but don't want to get involved. My heels clicked too loudly on the tile. I could feel my hands shaking as I pushed through the glass doors and out into the parking lot. The air outside was cool, early fall. I stood there for a second, breathing it in, trying to slow my heart down. The smell of marinara clung to my clothes. I pressed the key fob and heard my car unlock somewhere to my left. I sat behind the wheel and just stayed there. My purse was still on my lap, where I'd grabbed it automatically. My phone buzzed once. I didn't look. I thought about going back inside. That's the part I don't like to admit, but it's true. I told myself I could laugh it off, that I could slide back into my seat and let it become one of those moments you smooth over later the way I always did. I could tell myself he hadn't meant it that way. I could tell myself I was being sensitive. I pictured myself walking back in, smiling too hard, pretending nothing had happened, while the cake came out. Everyone would be relieved. Mark would give me that grateful look he gave me whenever I fix things for him. Instead, I started the car and drove home. The house was quiet when I got there. Our house, the one in a quiet subdivision off Route 59 with the maple tree out front and the creaky step on the back porch. I kicked off my shoes by the door and stood in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I didn't cry right away. I washed my hands. I wiped down the counter that didn't need wiping. I changed into sweatpants. I kept busy until there was nothing left to do. Apt Tunny. 42 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Laura. He's been drinking non-stop since you left. I stared at the screen. The words felt surreal, like they belonged to a different night, different marriage. I typed, deleted, typed again. Then I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. I didn't respond. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock on the dresser tick off the seconds. Mark didn't come home until after midnight. I heard the garage door open and close. His footsteps were unsteady on the stairs. He didn't come into the bedroom. He slept on the couch. In the morning, the house smelled faintly of coffee and something sour. I stood in the kitchen in my robe, staring at the empty chair, where he usually sat and tried to put words to what I was feeling. It wasn't just hurt. It wasn't even anger yet. It was the realization that this hadn't come out of nowhere. There had been signs, little things I'd brushed off over the years. Invitations that included Denise because it's easier for Kayla. Christmas cards addressed to Mark and family. Family photos where I was always the one taking the picture. I had told myself I was being mature, understanding, flexible. Standing in that restaurant, being asked to step out like an extra who'd wandered into the wrong scene. Something in me finally stopped bending. At 6:05 a.m., the coffee maker finished its cycle with a loud gurgle. The local news droned on about traffic on 8/8. I wrapped my hands around my mug and felt the warmth seep into my palms. I didn't know yet what I was gonna do. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about leaving. I was just thinking about that empty space in the photo and how easily someone else had stepped into it. I had spent years making myself smaller so everyone else could fit comfortably. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I didn't. The next morning, the word that kept circling my head was one everyone loved to use for me: understanding. I'd heard it so many times over the years it had lost all meaning. Mark's sister, Laura, said it. Danae said it, smiling like it was a compliment. Even Mark said it usually, right after he'd asked me to swallow something that hurt. "You're so understanding," he'd say, and I'd nod, because nodding was easier than explaining why my chest felt tight. I stood in the kitchen at 6:05 a.m., the sky still gray outside the window, listening to the coffee maker sputter and hiss. The radio was tuned to the local AM station, the one Mark liked, because they talked about traffic and high school football scores. A voice mentioned an accident near Aurora. I stirred cream into my mug and watched it swirl. Understanding had become a leash. I just hadn't noticed when it slipped around my neck. Mark came upstairs around 7, moving carefully like the house might bite him if he stepped wrong. He looked rough. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair still damp from the shower. He didn't meet my gaze right away. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I answered. He opened the fridge, stared into it for a moment, then shut it. Again, last night got a little out of hand. I waited. This was another thing I'd learned to do over the years. "Wait, I didn't mean to embarrass you," he said finally. "You know that, right?" I took a sip of coffee. It tasted bitter. "What did you mean, Mark?" I asked. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It was just a family photo. Denise was there for Kayla. It wasn't a big deal. There it was, the minimization, the casual eraser." I felt the familiar urge rise up, the one that told me to smooth this over, to reassure him, to make it easier for both of us to move on. My mouth even opened. Then I closed it again. "I need to get ready for work," I said instead. He looked startled, like I'd missed a line in a script we both knew by heart. "Okay," he said slowly. I left the kitchen before he could say anything else. At work, I couldn't concentrate. I work as an office manager for a small construction company in Lyall. Nothing glamorous. Phones, invoices, schedules, the kind of job where everyone assumes things just happen by themselves. By mid-morning, Sharon from accounting leaned over my cubicle wall. "You okay?" she asked. Sharon was 62, sharp as a tack, with short gray hair and a habit of cutting straight to the point. I trusted her. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She raised an eyebrow. "You want to try that again?" I laughed, short and humorless. "My husband told me to step out of his birthday photo last night. Said it was just family." Sharon didn't gasp or cluck her tongue. She just nodded once. "That'll do it." "That'll do what?" "Make you tired." She said, real tired. She went back to her desk without another word. Somehow that made me feel seen in a way all the reassurance in the world wouldn't have. All day, memories kept surfacing uninvited, like the Christmas cards. Every December, I picked them out at Target. The heavy cardstock with the snowflakes embossed on the front. I wrote each address by hand. I signed them Mark and Sarah. When thank you texts came in, they were always addressed to Mark. Once his aunt even wrote back, "So nice of Denise to think of us." I remembered the neighborhood barbecue last summer when someone asked how long Mark and Denise had been divorced, and he answered while I stood right there holding a tray of burgers. No one corrected themselves. Neither did he. I remembered standing behind the camera at Kayla's middle school graduation, zooming in so everyone else could fit. At the time, I told myself this was what being mature looked like. This was what a second marriage required. Flexibility, grace. By the time I drove home that evening, the word had curdled in my mouth: understanding. Mark wasn't home yet. I reheated leftovers and ate standing up at the counter. The house felt too quiet. After dinner, I opened the hall closet to grab the vacuum and nearly tripped over a stack of papers that had slid out onto the floor. I crouched down to pick them up, irritated. Mark had a habit of shoving things wherever they fit. Old mail, insurance statements, manuals for appliances we didn't even own anymore. As I stacked the papers, I noticed a manila folder with handwriting on the tab. Mortgagee deed, insurance. I froze. I don't know what made me sit down right there on the hallway floor and open it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe some part of me was already looking for proof that I wasn't imagining things. Inside were copies of our mortgage statements, the home insurance policy, and the deed to the house. Our house. Both names were there, his and mine, clear as day. I kept flipping. There were bank statements from our joint account, emails printed, out old ones with dates from years ago. One caught my eye. Hey babe, it started. Can you sign this real quick? It's just for the refinance. You're better with paperwork anyway. I remembered that night he'd handed me the papers at the kitchen table, already half asleep, trusting me to handle it. I had, without question, I sat back against the wall, the folder in my lap. For years I'd let everyone believe I was on the sidelines, that I was extra optional. On paper, though, I was anything but. My phone buzzed. A text from Laura. I hope you know Mark loves you. He's just bad with emotions. I stared at the message, then set the phone down without answering. Later that night, lying in bed alone, I stared at the ceiling and let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding all day. What if I stopped being understanding? What if I stopped translating his behavior into something easier for other people to swallow? The idea scared me more than I expected. Being the agreeable one had been my role for so long. I wasn't sure who I'd be without it. But as I drifted off to sleep, one thing was clear. I wasn't invisible on paper. And maybe, just maybe, that mattered more than anyone realized. I didn't go looking for leverage. I stumbled into it the way you stumble into the truth by cleaning up someone else's mess. Saturday morning, Mark was out golfing with his brother-in-law, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. I stayed home and did what I always did when my nerves were shot. I organized drawers, files, the kind of quiet physical work that lets your brain catch up. I pulled everything out of the hall closet and spread it across the living room floor. Old manuals, warranty cards, stacks of unopened mail with Mark's name on them. I sorted recycled, stacked. That's when I found the credit card statements. They weren't hidden, just shoved into an old shoebox like they'd take care of themselves. I sat cross-legged on the rug and flipped through them, my stomach tightening with each page. Charges I recognized: Home Depot, Costco, the gas station near his office, and others I didn't. A new set of golf clubs, a weekend hotel in Milwaukee, bar tabs. That made my eyebrows rise. I opened my laptop and logged into our bank account, then our credit monitoring app, the one I'd set up years ago back when we were trying to get a better mortgage rate. My name, my email, my password, the numbers stared back at me, calm and impartial. My credit score was excellent. His was not. I leaned back against the couch and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was clarity. For years I'd been the one making sure bills were paid on time, the one who caught errors, the one who kept our finances steady while Mark played the role of provider. People assumed he handled everything. He didn't correct them. I had. My phone rang. Sharon, you busy? She asked. Sort of, I said. But no, I told her what I'd found. Not in detail, just enough. She was quiet for a moment. You know what that means? Right, that I'm better at spreadsheets than I thought. That you've been carrying him, she said, financially and otherwise. I laughed softly. That's not how it feels. It never does when you're the one holding the weight. That afternoon, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Her office was in Downers Grove, in a low brick building near a strip mall. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. I filled out a clipboard form with shaking hands, half convinced I was overreacting. Patricia Klein-Pat was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled into a low bun and reading glasses perched on her head. She offered me tea and didn't rush me once. I told her everything. The photo, the years of understanding, the folder on the floor. She listened, nodding, occasionally, her pen moving across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set the pen down. You're not here because you want to punish him, she said. No, I said quickly. I can't keep doing this. She studied me for a moment. You've been protecting his image, socially, financially, emotionally. I swallowed. I thought that's what being married meant. It does, she said gently, when it goes both ways. She explained my options: separation, counseling, boundaries. None of it sounded dramatic. It sounded practical, adult. Then she asked, do you know who he lists as his at work? The question landed harder than I expected. I assume it's me, I said. Assume, she repeated. That night, I checked Mark's work email was still logged in on the home computer. I hesitated, guilt flaring, then reminded myself I wasn't snooping for secrets. I was checking facts. Emergency contact. Denise. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark, the house quiet around me. I wasn't family in photos. I wasn't first in line when it mattered. Something in me hardened. Not into anger, but resolve. The next week, I stopped doing things. Not all at once, not dramatically, just quietly. I didn't remind him about his blood pressure, medication refill. When he realized at the pharmacy, he called me irritated. "Can you just call it in?" he asked. "I can't today," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Steady," he huffed. "Fine." At the church fundraiser planning meeting, I didn't bring the sign-up sheets or the dessert. When someone asked where they were, Mark looked at me. "I thought you had them," he said. "I didn't," I replied. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Someone cleared their throat. The meeting moved on. At home, he grew restless, snappier. He lost track of things, missed a deadline at work, came home late, frustrated. "You've been distant," he said one night. "I've been busy," I answered. It wasn't a lie. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Kayla. "Are you mad at my dad?" I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. "Now," I typed back after a moment. "I'm just figuring some things out." She replied a minute later. "I didn't like the picture thing." I closed my eyes. In that moment, I understood something important. I wasn't the only one who'd seen it. I was just the only one who'd been asked to step out. Once you stop holding everything together, things don't fall apart all at once. They wobble first. That's what surprised me most. I'd expected fireworks, accusations, some dramatic showdown in the kitchen. Instead, what I got were small failures spaced just far enough, apart that no one could blame bad luck anymore. Mark started misplacing things. His phone, his keys, papers he swore he'd left on the counter. He asked me where they were the way he always had, already half annoyed that I didn't know. "I haven't seen them," I'd say. Sometimes that was true, sometimes it wasn't. Either way, I didn't go looking. On Wednesday afternoon, he called from Walgreens. "They don't have my blood pressure refill," he said. "Did you call it in?" I was at my desk at work. A stack of invoices spread in front of me. Sharon glanced over curious. "No," I said. "I didn't." There was a pause. "Why not?" "I forgot," I said. Again, not a lie. Just not the whole truth. He exhaled hard. "I guess I'll deal with it." After I hung up, my hands were shaking. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. This was harder than I'd expected. Not because it was wrong, but because it went against every habit I'd built. For years, I'd been the quiet safety net, the backup plan, the one who noticed before things went wrong. Now, I was letting them go wrong. Friday night, we attended a neighborhood barbecue hosted by the Wilsons 2 doors down. Normally, I'd have brought a salad or dessert, arrived early, helped set up. This time, I showed up empty-handed 10 minutes late, wearing a plain sweater, instead of the cheerful hostess version of myself. Mark noticed immediately. "You didn't make the pasta salad," he asked too loudly. "I didn't," I said. He frowned, confused, like he was missing a step in a dance. "I thought you were going to." "I didn't say that." We stood there for a second, surrounded by the smell of grilled meat and the sound of classic rock playing from someone's Bluetooth speaker. One of the neighbors glanced over, then looked away. Dinner was awkward. Someone asked Mark what time we were eating. He snapped that it would be ready when it was ready. I watched a woman across the table raise her eyebrows at her husband. This was new. At home that night, Mark paced the living room while I read in bed. "Something's going on with you," he said finally. "You're acting like I did something terrible." I set my book down. "You did," he scoffed. "That photo again, Sarah. You're blowing that way out of proportion." I felt the old anger rise up, sharp and familiar. I let it pass. "It wasn't just the photo," I said. "It was everything around it." He shook his head. "You're being dramatic." That word landed differently now. "Good night, Mark," I said, turning off the lamp. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Laura. "I'm worried about him," she wrote. "He's not himself." I stared at the text, then typed back something I'd never said before. "Neither am I." The real test came a week later when Mark told me about the retirement recognition dinner. "They're doing it at the VFW hall," he said. "Saturday night, a bunch of people from church and work. I need you there." The way he said it made something twist in my chest. "I'll think about it," I said. He looked startled. "Think about it?" "Yes." He stared at me, then laughed a short, uneasy sound. "You're coming." I met his eyes. "We'll see." That night, Kayla texted again. "Dad's been really stressed," she wrote. "Are you guys okay?" I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, feeling the weight of everything pressing in. This was the part no one talked about. The collateral damage, the doubt. I typed back carefully. We're working through some things. None of this is your fault. She replied with a heart emoji. Then after a minute, you didn't deserve that. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. By Friday afternoon, Mark was on edge. He snapped at the dog. Hey, forgot a meeting. He accused me of hiding things from him. I'm not hiding, I said. I'm just not fixing. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my resolve wavering. What if this was cruel? What if I was hurting him more than necessary? What if I was wrong? Then I pictured myself stepping out of that photo. I went to the dinner, not for him, for me. The VFW hall smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long on a burner and floor, cleaner that never quite masked the past. Folding chairs were lined up in neat rows, name tags stuck to jackets and blouses. People greeting each other with that particular mix of warmth and habit you see at church events and retirement dinners. It was Saturday, night 6:30 p.m. Mark's big moment. I stood in the bathroom at home for a long time before we left, staring at my reflection. I didn't dress up. No bright colors, no statement jewelry, just a navy blouse, black slacks, low heels. I wanted to look like myself, not an accessory. The drive over was quiet. Mark kept adjusting the radio, never settling on a station. His knee bounced. I watched the familiar streets pass by and felt oddly calm, like something had already decided itself. Inside the hall, people spotted Mark immediately. Hey, there he is. Happy retirement. About time they recognized you. Hands clapped his back. He smiled, shook hands, slipped easily into the role he knew best. Respected, solid, the man everyone thought they knew. Denise was there. I'd noticed her right away standing near the refreshment table in a cream cardigan, chatting with a woman from church. She looked comfortable, at ease, like she belonged. Kayla stood beside her, scrawling on her phone. When she saw me, her face softened. She gave a small wave. Mark didn't see them at first. When he did, his shoulders loosened just a bit. Good, he murmured. They made it. Not you. We took our seats. The program started. Speeches about dedication. Years of service being a family man. Each phrase landed like a pebble dropped into still water. Ripples. I felt but didn't show. Then it was time for photos. Someone from the church committee stood up and raised her phone. Let's get a family picture with Mark. Mark turned automatically and reached for my hand. His fingers closed around, mine warm and familiar, like nothing had ever changed. For a split second, the old instinct flared. Step in, smile, make it easy. Instead, I gently pulled my hand back. Oh, I said, my voice, calm, polite, loud enough to carry. I shouldn't be in this one. Mark blinked. What? I smiled. The kind of smile you use when you're trying not to make a scene. You told me last week I'm not family for pictures, remember? I'll just go grab more ice. The room went still, not dramatically, just wrong, like someone had missed a step. A few people laughed uncertainly. Then the laughter died when no one else joined in. Denise looked down at her shoes. Kayla's head snapped up. Dad, she said. Mark's face flushed. He forced a chuckle. She's joking. I didn't move. Tom Reynolds, a family friend Mark had known since high school, frowned. Was she joking, Mark? That did it. Mark's smile faltered. He opened his mouth, closed it. The phone lowered slowly. No one took the picture. I turned and walked toward the refreshment table, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. My hands shook as I scooped ice into a plastic cup. I focused on the sound, the clatter, the scrape, anything to keep myself upright behind me. Voices murmured, questions whispered, a truth finally loose in the room. Later in the car, Mark exploded. What the hell was that? He demanded. You embarrassed? Me, I stared out the window as the parking lot light slid past. No, I said quietly. I didn't. He was still ranting when we pulled into the driveway. I went inside and locked the bathroom door, my legs finally giving way. I slid down to the floor and cried, not from regret, but release. For the first time in a long time, the truth had stood in the open. The house felt different after that night. Quieter, yes, but also clearer, like a window that had finally been wiped clean. For a few days, Mark and I moved around each other carefully, speaking only when necessary. He slept on the couch again. I didn't ask him to come back to bed. He tried anger first, then self-pity, then silence. On Tuesday evening, he stood in the kitchen while I rinsed dishes, watching me like he was waiting for something. You didn't have to do that, he said finally. I turned off the faucet and faced him. I didn't have to step out of that photo either. He rubbed his face, suddenly older than I'd ever seen him. You made me look like a fool. I shook my head. You looked like yourself. That was the moment something shifted, not snapped, shifted. Over the next few weeks, the consequences settled in. Not all of them dramatic, but all of them real. Some people from church stopped, calling me the way they used to. Others reached out quietly. Sharon brought me coffee one morning and said about time, with a small smile. Laura called once, awkward and subdued, and said she hadn't realized how things looked from the outside. I didn't realize how they looked from the inside, I told her. Kayla came over one Saturday afternoon, while Mark was out. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd signed papers years ago without thinking. I'm glad you said something, she said, picking at the edge of a napkin. I always felt like I was supposed to pretend nothing was weird. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You never have to pretend with me. Thank you for listening. Share it if it resonated.